Hey everybody, I'm JJ. You're watching Reality Survival, and so today I'm going to talk a little bit about the Israeli and Hamas conflict and what I think some possibilities are. Watching on different ways that it could go. Watching the news and seeing all the headlines and the podcasters and the pundits talk about it. You know, everybody is like, this is World War III, it's Armageddon, the war's already started, and, you know, all this kind of stuff, and whatever. And maybe that's right, but maybe it's not, too. There's a lot of different ways that this thing could go, because there's a lot of different interests that are involved here, and to a large extent, some of the most powerful interests don't want to see anything happen. So let's talk about that a little bit. So I think that the most likely scenario in this is that the United States is going to get involved to a limited degree. They're going to get involved with the targeting of, some Hamas, some Hezbollah stuff, and some IRGC, Iranian-related support network stuff, the things that the IRGC uses to help coordinate logistics and stuff like that with the Hamas and Hezbollah. Now, I don't believe that it's likely that we are going to get engaged in a land invasion of Iran. I think that's a very low likelihood. Nobody who knows anything about Iran wants to go into Iran and have any kind of an occupation, because it would be a nightmare, an utter disaster, far worse than Vietnam ever was, as far as facing an insurgency and how difficult of an insurgency we'd be facing. It would be way worse than Afghanistan. It would be way worse than Vietnam. It would be a nightmare. They've occupied that land for 4,000 years. So you talk about tunnel networks and just support networks and all. I mean, it would be utter disaster. I don't think anybody has any interest in that. If they do, they're crazy. And if you see the United States going into a land war in Iran, then shit's gone really sideways. It's far more likely that we will get engaged, we'll be involved in a limited capacity, offering support in targeting areas that are associated with terrorism, and the IRGC's activities related to terrorism. So, not official, not likely to be official, Iranian targets, but targets that are involved in supporting Hamas and Hezbollah and through the IRGC, which is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or I think that's what it is, IRGC. It's like Iran's special ops, sort of, kind of. Anyhow, we'll probably see the Navy and the naval air forces get involved in some of those kinds of activities over the coming year to next 18 months or something along those lines. However long we're going to be involved with this. It might be a couple of years, but I really don't think that it's going to be a full-scale invasion like Iraq was, or like Afghanistan was, or anything like that. For the most part, Israel will be the ones, this is all my opinion again, that's going to do most of the heavy lifting. Now, there might be some unconventional forces, there might be some special ops guys that are helping out, there might be, some limited other involvement, but it's not going to be large levels of conventional U.S. forces, dealing with the Hamas issue in Gaza or the West Bank or, anywhere. Israel is primarily going to deal with that, and they can handle it. They aren't going to have any problems dealing with that. So I think that's the most likely scenario of what you're going to see. Israel carrying the heavy burden, the United States providing some funding, some support, and some naval and aerial, strike options into contested targets of opportunity, that kind of thing. However, I don't think it's going to go too much further than that. There are other scenarios, though, that could happen, such as if Iran starts to really provide significant logistical support, and meaning ammunition and weapons and all that kind of stuff, and we start to see a literal supply line coming across Iraq from Iran, and it opens up what might constitute, if you consider that there's Hezbollah is already involved, if they're already facing a two-front war, then what would be the third front? There's a good chance that Israel is going to get stretched thin in that capacity, and I would be concerned about Israel considering to use tactical nukes involved, and getting those involved in the situation. And then we also need to kind of pause here and talk about the fact that some analysts are saying that Iran may have enough nuclear energy for 1 to maybe up to 5 nuclear devices. Whether or not that's true or not, and whether or not they actually have it configured into a usable warhead that's deliverable, that's kind of unknown. And anybody who says they know for sure, I don't know that they know for sure. There's speculation, conjecture. It's hard to say. If Israel determines that is factual, that they do have a nuke available, then Israel would more likely use a preemptive strike on Iran, on those facilities, to make sure they destroy those facilities. Or a bunker buster type attack, or whatever they thought, was sufficient. But it definitely raises the likelihood or the possibility of some sort of nuclear use in the Middle East, whether it be by Iran doing it first or whether it be by Israel. Both of them have the chutzpah to use them. On the case of Israel, they wouldn't do it unless they felt like their existence was threatened, right? Like I said, like a three-front war, or a war where you had multiple Gulf states join the fight against them, and they were being outgunned and they couldn't hold their own. And they're very formidable. They can hold their own against 3 or 4 different countries in the area, probably, no problem. If it got to be 5 or 6 different countries, it'd be harder for them, If Iran was hitting them hard with EFPs, the VBED EFPs, explosive form penetrators that we had to deal with in Iraq, and really tearing them up, you could foresee a situation where if a lot of those kinds of things were being infiltrated into civilian Israeli populous areas, and all that kind of stuff, after a long time, you could see circumstances that would get Israel into the right mindset that their existence is being threatened, and they have to react with more force. I don't think that's likely, but I can see for scenarios on how that could happen. Now the Iranians, on the other hand, they are the primary leadership of Iran are mostly made up of 12ers, which is a particularly apocalyptic sect of the Muslim faith that essentially believes that it's their responsibility to bring on the apocalypse and to hasten the return of the 12th Mahdi, which is what they call like their savior, you know. And so they see it as their responsibility to help bring this on. Now, is it possible that they view this like everybody else in the world does, that thinks that this is going to be Armageddon? Well, yeah, it's possible. Personally, I don't think this is going to be Armageddon. I don't think it's even close. I don't think it's. I think people are completely misreading Bible prophecy on this, but that's neither here nor there. Israel or Iran is crazy enough to detonate a nuke somewhere in Israel if they get one. And the Israelis have said very clearly before, we will not allow Iran to get a nuke. So it's possible that all this buildup and all this activity in the Gulf and everything is related to the possibility that Iran has enough nuclear material to be able to construct a warhead, and that our presence in the Gulf and the limited strikes that we are doing. I think I saw some headlines this morning that said that we've started some in retaliation for some of the drone attacks that have been hit, but it's possible that all this is an effort to put pressure on Iran to basically submit to a monitoring, a complete monitoring program on their nuclear program, like the IAEA monitoring aspect of it, so that we can see where they're at and what they're doing and how far it's developed, and basically force them to open up all the doors on all the facilities to see what level and where all the research is. I think that is probably the strategic goal here. There's other tactical advantages that are happening, but my sense of it is that, Israel probably, and again, this is just me reading between the lines on news stories, but Israel probably told the United States, hey, we know they're getting close, and we just had the worst attack on our homeland since World War II, probably. We're gonna end them, and the United States probably said, hold on, hold on here, let's not do that, because, like I said, there's a lot of interests in the Middle East, and if Israel is allowed to do that, or if they do it on their own unilaterally, the entire region will probably retaliate against Israel, and oil flows out of the Gulf will probably shut down for a significant period of time. Neither China, nor Europe, nor the United States, nobody wants that to happen. They supply a significant portion of the world's oil, and if that gets shut down, economies around the world that are already teetering on the brink are going to be hosed, literally like screwed. So nobody wants that to happen. So I don't think that they're going to actually allow Israel or take them off the leash in that way, and I don't think that there'll be a full-blown land invasion, or anything like that into Iran. I think a lot of this is posturing. A lot of this is letting the leadership in Iran know, we can hit you when and where we want. You need to fall in line. You need to open up to testing, for monitoring. And if you don't, you're going to suffer the consequences. That's my assessment of what is most likely here. I mean, like I said, it could turn sideways. There's always that possibility. If Israel acts unilaterally and uses a nuke in Iran, it's very likely that a lot of the other Gulf states, a lot of the other Muslim countries in the area will turn against Israel, even though, they had been working on, the Abraham Accords and other types of agreements to recognize their existence and all that. It would reverse a lot of that work that had been put forward that way, and it would cause wide-scale problems. If that happened, I think it's likely, and I hesitate a little bit here, but I think it's likely that we would fall on the side of Israel, and that we would probably back them in that conflict, and it would, that would probably trigger a wider regional or world war kind of situation. But it's going to be different. If there is a world war this time, it's going to be significantly different than the last World War, and the reason is it has to do with the distribution of power and military technical capability. And in World War II, Germany and England were the nation's leading powerhouses, and as well, England and Germany were close. Germany probably had the advantage. Russia had numbers. They didn't have the technology. They had a lot of brute force, and then we had the United States that was sort of a emerging power. And what came out of that was that Germany and England were significantly reduced in capability. The USSR was built up in capability afterwards, with Iron Curtain and all that, and then, the USSR. And then the United States obviously became the clear superpower. Now, we're not in that same situation anymore because USSR is out of the picture. Russia is the second most powerful army in Ukraine, and even if they're the first power, they don't have the capability. It's obvious that they don't have the capability to manage any other significant engagements at this time. There was a report today that, whether or not it's true or not, who knows, but that they're shooting their own deserters because people are deserting at such a high rate. That morale, those kinds of problems only cause worse morale problems. When you see your buddy get shot because he's trying to leave, that doesn't help your morale any at all. So Russia's got big problems. So they're not even in the race to be a contender in a world war. The only other real competitor that we have from a U.S. perspective is China. And China, as I've said to you guys many times, is wholly dependent upon having inputs to support their export economy. Okay? If they don't have the inputs, the resources, the inflows of materials, their economy fails to work. And they're also facing a demographic collapse. Those numbers are real. They're not. It isn't. It's not even really up for debate. I mean, and their army can't operate really anywhere outside of their borders. They don't have the ability to transport their army anywhere. So, unless you're going to fight in China, their army isn't a threat. very few of their naval vessels have blue water, open water capability, and they have a few bases here and there where they can get some ships to and from the Persian Gulf so that they can escort their ships so they don't get hit by pirates at the Horn of Africa and that kind of thing. But it's a limited capability. It is not sufficient to be able to execute a global war or a war in the Middle East, right? They could engage in some small battles, but it's not sufficient to do widespread warfare on a global level like we're talking about, like with World War II. So even if World War III did start, it isn't going to be the same. It isn't going to be like World War II was. This war would be fought completely differently. It would be, primarily aerial engagements, naval engagements. You're not going to see, standing army invasions and that kind of thing like we did before. There's space-based weaponry. There's all this other shit. Like it's a totally different thing than what people are picturing when they picture World War III, like in the context of World War II. It would be executed much differently. And to be honest, aside from the civil unrest and the potential power grid issues that we might face, and just because of our poor infrastructure, the lack of funding going into domestic programs and domestic infrastructure because it was being spent overseas, we probably wouldn't see a lot of the issues here on our home front. Now, some people talk about sleeper cells and all that kind of stuff, and that we could see some of that happen here, some attacks and some terrorism and all that kind of stuff. That's true. That's possible. It's within the realm of possibility. Although the idea that a lot of these sleeper cells come in through the southern border is not really an accurate assessment of how this happens. I'm not going to get into it in this video because I'm probably already rambling too long, but actually the majority of known people who have been caught previously in sleeper cell stuff is all caught through legitimate actual immigration, because they select people who are clean, who can get through the screening process, because it gives them more freedom of movement and the ability to do more for their cell. So there's lots of strategic reasons why they want to do that, and important tactical reasons as well. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. It is possible that people can come across the southern border. I'm not saying it's not possible. There have been people who've been associated with terrorists, name matches and stuff like that, and you see news stories. But that doesn't mean that those people were specifically dispatched to come across the southern border to be an operative. What it most likely means is that they had a shitty life. And I've sat and talked with many terrorists, members of Taliban, members of Islamic Army of Iraq, lots of other different terror groups, and talking to the members, and they don't even believe in the ideology. Half of them, most of them only do it because if they don't, their family will get raped, murdered, killed, etc., etc. So I wish I could explain this more fully, because it's difficult to understand. The way we think about these groups is not the way that the reality of the situation is. Like, if you can imagine, if you lived in an urban city, say Houston or something, I don't know, some big urban city or whatever, and you lived in a really urban area, and a gang took over that area, and that gang started requiring that if you live in the area, you're part of the gang, and they strong arm everybody around you, and you're the last holdout, and eventually you either have to move or you just become part of the gang. You know, it's kind of just the way it goes. And that's what the majority or a lot of these foot soldiers, that's the situation that they're actually in. You know, they live in certain areas and territory that gets taken over by these terrorist groups, these warlords, and all this stuff. And then, you know, they reluctantly become a part of the thing. And they're enthusiastic when they have to be because they got to show their loyalty. But when it really comes down to it, they don't have their heart in it. And so when a lot of these guys get over here to America, they see that it's an amazing place to live, and it's beautiful, and you have some degree of freedoms, and that basically the things that they were told was a lie. And so they just melt away into the background. They don't partake. They don't you know, get involved. They lose their contact information for their people, that kind of thing. I believe that happens way more frequently than we ever even can probably even track. Not saying that there's not cells here, okay? That's not what I'm saying. There are probably some, but the majority of them are not these hardened radicals like people think they are. Again, I have a lot of experience in talking to these people, and it's just not the reality. So, could we see some of that civil unrest, some of those attacks, some terrorist attacks here in the Homeland? Yes, we could. But it's not likely to be a wide-scale invasion. Like you keep hearing people talk about in these news stories about, oh, there's been 2.4 million people come across the border in the last year, and they're acting like that this 2.4 million people is a standing army or something, right? Like they're all coming, they're all being directed by this, you know, single unilateral force that's going to attack America. And man, that's just not true. It's just not. If it were up to me, I would love to have a border freaking, 30 feet tall and 30 feet deep all the way across, and everybody had to come in legally. And I would open up immigration to twice as much as what we have it now, as long as you came in legally and you were identified and all that kind of stuff, and had your background screenings and everything else, and gave all your bio information and all that stuff. I have no problem with taking good candidates, right? But I'm for controlling the border, but I'm just saying that the reality of the situation is not that the people who are coming across the border are some sort of an organized military threat. That's just not true. The vast majority of these people are just, most of them nowadays are just trying to flee Venezuela to get away from socialism. And honestly, we talk about the fact that a lot of them vote Democrat when they first get here. I'll bet you anything, in a few years, once these people get settled, most of these people from Venezuela, just like the Cubans, are going to be conservatives. And the Democrats are probably going to regret this in a couple of election cycles. Because most of those people hold more conservative values than they do liberal values. And that's just true. I mean, most of them are religious. Most of them believe in family. Most of them, are pro-life. I mean, they just are. They're in a shitty situation. And so, yeah, they probably try to take advantage of a lot of benefits and stuff when they first get here. But they're hard workers, man. I tell you what, if you don't think that the majority of immigrants that come to this country are hard workers, you're not paying attention. You're just not. Because they are. And so I don't buy into this whole, that there's an army of military-age males coming across the southern border narrative. That's BS. That ain't true. We are not likely to see significant long-term disruptions or any kind of land invasion or anything like that here in America, even if World War III starts. Okay, Now, possibility of nukes happening, okay, that's fine. We've talked about that in the past. Not very likely for a full-scale exchange for lots and lots of reasons. We could go into it again, but we probably don't need to. Maybe a limited strike, 3 or 4 type missiles kind of thing. Not a showstopper. Well, it's a showstopper in that it would be horrific and lots of people would die, but it's not something that ends the country, right? You can get through that. And so I think we need to adjust. I think where I'm going with this, and again, I'm a little bit of a ramble, so I apologize. Not scripted like my normal ones, but because I'm driving, I don't have any notes. But I think where I'm going on this is that the likelihood on the way that this is going to be prosecuted is that it isn't probably going to affect us here in the States in the same meaningful ways that it will to the people over there, right? We might see some short-term supply chain disruptions. We might see, failing infrastructure over the next few years because money doesn't get spent where it needs to. There could be a rise in civil unrest for sure. There could be a rise in terror attacks. That's probably true. But all that stuff's going to be relatively minor and small scale for the most part. We're not talking about region or nationwide SHTF, economy ending, economy crashing kind of stuff. That's just not where we're at. Because we don't have a unified opponent. We don't have there isn't the big boogeyman out there that people say that there is. China has a certain degree of influence, but it's waning. Their influence is waning significantly, and they know that. And they know that they're dependent on us for their economy. So I don't see that there's going to be any direct conflict with China right now. We're still. I still think that we're a couple years away from that or more. If it were to happen, and I'm not even convinced that China's ever going to go into Taiwan. I know they talk about it. It's possible, but I'm not 100% convinced. I'm not sure that they have. I'm not sure that the advantage is there for them that they kind of initially thought that it would be. So, we'll see. We'll see how time goes. Maybe they do. Maybe they try it. And if that's the case, then we'll just have to see how that goes. I think it would largely be the same. The United States would provide support just like we are with Ukraine, but we're not going to probably put boots on the ground and all that kind of stuff in Taiwan either. We don't really have the vested interest. We would make sure that the TSCM chip factories were completely destroyed, and then we would pull out. Might keep everybody from getting their iPhone 16s or 17s on schedule or whatever. But yeah, it's not going to be a huge loss. The strategic value of Taiwan to the United States is really only in their high-end chip production. And since that has the TSCM factories, started to move to Arizona a couple of years ago, and I'm not super concerned about it personally. So I think we can take a breath. I know that everybody is really getting wrapped around the axle. They think Armageddon's coming. I'd just like to remind everybody that since 1948, there have been a lot of proxy wars. There have been a lot of wars inside Israel, and none of them were the Armageddon, right? I mean, there's been a lot of engagements of this very nature before, and even worse. The 67 war was multiple countries coming against Israel. Everybody at that time thought for sure that was going to be Armageddon too, and it wasn't. 2006, the same thing, you know. And I mean, there's been multiple times when everybody thought that Israel's involved in a war, that must be Armageddon, you know, because of the biblical prophecies and everything. Well, it didn't turn out that way, and this one probably won't either. Same thing with Russia. Russia has been involved in, we've been involved in, I don't know, probably 10, 12 different proxy wars with Russia since, you know, the end of World War II. I mean, a lot of times there's been proxy wars, you know, with Russia directly. I mean, Vietnam, Falkland Islands, Afghanistan 1, Afghanistan 2. I mean, you know, there's been many times. So, just because the main players are involved doesn't mean that everything's going to fall apart. The most important thing to remember, man, I'm telling you, when it comes to these things, politics and figuring out what's going on and everything, is you really got to you got to remember the fact that the people who are in power are going to want to stay in power. Anything that threatens that you know, rocks that boat, they don't like that. They don't like that at all. And so I just think that it's a more reasonable take on this is that there will be some regional action, some regional military involvement, you know, some basic targets hit, some messages will be sent, but then things will start to settle back down. Yeah, that seems to me to be the most likely scenario. The Gulf countries are not going to want to, you know, try to deploy their quote-unquote militaries, which their militaries are not even really militaries. They have some military equipment, but the third country nationals from the Philippines and you know, Pakistan and Bangladesh are the ones that are actually their soldiers. I mean, there's no Saudis that are going to pick up a gun and fight. Okay, that's not a thing. they don't even get their own coffee, let alone actually get dirty in a fight, right? That's just laughable. So, you know, the Saudi Arabian military is not a real military. It's not. They have some technology. They have some stuff that we've, you know, given them and that they've bought from Russia and here and there, but they don't have a real fighting force. It's just not true. Same thing with the Omanis, and same thing with, you know, all these countries. They could put up a good insurgency inside their own country, right? Like they can deal with those kinds of things, those kinds of threats, but they don't have the ability to prosecute, you know, a transnational war across borders into other spaces far from home. They just don't have the logistical capability. They don't have the know-how. They've never done it. I mean, since these countries were put into existence, they've largely stayed within their borders, you know? So you can't just organically create that capability to, like, go do these things on a wide scale. I mean, Egypt and Jordan and a few of the other countries that attacked Israel tried to attack Israel right on their border back in '67 and, you know, stuff like that. Iraq tried to go into Kuwait. I mean, there's been little things, but, you know, not some massive movements of troops across the regions and stuff like that. Like, it's just not realistic. And anybody who's trying to get you to buy into all that, they're just not. I don't know. I mean, they're just not being real. You know, like, it's just very, very unlikely. It would be a complete revolution and a complete 180 from everything that we know about the status quo and what is the power structures are in the Middle East and how they operate and all that kind of stuff. If something like a World War II style World War III were to happen, it would be a shock to me. I just don't see it happening. That these regimes barely hold on to power as it is. Like all the people in Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states and all that, they have a thin grasp on control as it is, and if they do anything to that allows them to loosen the grip on their population, like dealing with a problem somewhere else, they're gonna lose control. Like they only have the ability to control what they have, and that's all strategically in place on purpose, right? We don't supply weapons to countries to give them enough scale to be able to project force anywhere outside their borders, through different programs and things like that. Like they're only given so much. And so, I mean, if you want to do some research on this, look up the size of these militaries, right? Look up the of the players that would be involved, and look at the number of aircraft and the number of ships and the number of tanks and all that kind of stuff, and you're going to be able to see, I mean, the numbers are very small, very, very small. Okay, it's just they don't have wide scale military capability, so it's unlikely that we're going to see a wide scale war in that way. I really think that this is all about messaging. This is all about getting Iran, on board with some monitoring for their nuclear program. And if they don't, then those facilities will probably get destroyed one way or another by us or Israel or somebody. And that program will be set back another 5 or 10 years. And then we'll kick the can down the road and we'll be doing a little bit more. But I do think that Israel is they're gonna put a hurting to Hamas. That is gonna happen because they were attacked in the way that they were, and nobody's gonna stand in the way of them for long for getting their pound of flesh on that. Understandably. Just like nobody stood in our way. I mean, nobody could stand in our way, but with Afghanistan and 9/11 and all that. So, that's going to happen. But I really don't think that it's going to turn into World War III. And I definitely don't think it's Armageddon. And I think everybody who's reading the Bible prophecy that way, they need to do some more studying personally. And I know that a lot of people will disagree with me, and that's cool. I understand, but you go back and look at what the churches were saying back in the '67 war and all that kind of stuff, and they were saying the same things. And everybody was worried about it. They've been worried about it multiple times since 1948. Like I said, there's been lots and lots of times when everybody was sure the second coming was right around the corner, and it is, but not the way that you think it is. So, anyway. That's it for me. Don't forget to live the 6 Ps. Oh, if you guys want, I'm going to let you know, we have a cell phone app called the American Prepping Academy. Got lots of great prepping channels on there, and trying to get more on it all the time. And so you can go to the Google Play Store, or you can go to the Apple Store, and you can download it. Again, it's American Prepping Academy, and you can check that out. Or you can download it direct from app.americanpreppingacademy.com. And if you have a channel and you'd like to be considered to be in the academy, then you can submit an application there. I'll take a look at your stuff, and then we'll get you signed up, as long as you're not doing a lot of fear porn and all that. Anyhow, that's it for me. You guys have a great day. Don't forget to live 6 Ps. Proper prior preparation prevents poor performance. Stay safe.